The metallic tang of poorly brewed coffee clung to the stale air of the accounting department, a perpetual olfactory assault that no amount of industrial air freshener could ever truly mask. My name is Elise Vance, and I never wanted to be a magic girl. Not with the frilly outfits, the saccharine catchphrases, or the eternal soul-crushing perma-grins plastered across the faces of those poor, deluded optimists who did want to be magic girls. No, thank you. I just wanted to crunch numbers from 9 to 5, make my rent, and maybe, just maybe occasionally, get a good night's sleep on a Saturday night. But fate, or whatever cosmic dickhead decided to bless me with the ability to bend reality with a flick of my wrist and a whispered incantation, had other plans. Still, it does have its perks in my normal day-to-day hours, like now. Elise, have you finished the Q3 reports yet? They were due, yesterday? Janice's voice, a high-pitched whine that could shatter glass, pierced through the already strained quiet of their office. She stood over my cubicle, her shadow falling across my screen, effectively cutting off the last sliver of natural light allowed into this fluorescent tomb. Her perfume, a cloying mix of lilies and desperation, made my nostrils burn. She always wore too much of it, like she was trying to mask the scent of her own existential angst. I didn't even bother looking up. I'm working on them, Janice. My fingers continued to dance across the keyboard, entering figures I barely registered, the rhythm of my work a comforting drone against the invasive sound of her voice. Well, you seem to be taking your sweet time considering the deadline is breathing down our necks, she huffed, her breath surprisingly, carrying the faint sweet and sour scent of those nasty gummy worms she always gnawed on. It was a bizarre juxtaposition, the cloying perfume and the artificial fruit. I twitched a muscle in my jaw, a familiar irritation beginning to prickle at the back of my neck. Janice, my personal albatross. She was the kind of person who'd ask you to email her the report you just handed her, the kind of person who'd correct your grammar in a casual conversation, then sign off her own emails with best regards, punctuated by 3 enthusiastic exclamation marks. She was, in short, a festering pustule on the otherwise relatively tolerable ass of corporate life. I usually let it slide. Most of the time, I could tune her out, her voice blending into the cacophony of keyboard clicks, hushed phone calls, and the distant hum of the server room. But today, the grey sky outside, the lukewarm coffee that tasted like despair, and a particularly stubborn bug in my pivot table were conspiring against my patience. Today, Janice was pushing me. Slowly, deliberately, I leaned back in my chair, stretching my neck until I heard a satisfying pop. I finally met her gaze, a bland, neutral expression plastered on my face. Janice, I'm perfectly capable of managing my workload. Perhaps you should focus on your own. A vein throbbed in her temple, a tiny, almost imperceptible pulsation beneath her carefully applied foundation. Bingo. She hated being told what to do, especially by someone she considered beneath her, which, in Janice's world, was pretty much everyone except our boss, Mr. Henderson, who, ironically, had recently gone half-blind after berating me for an hour, and probably wouldn't notice if the Q3 reports were written in crayon. I kept my hands casually folded in my lap, one just brushing against the worn denim of my jeans. My gaze locked with hers, cold and unwavering. Internally, a tiny, almost imperceptible surge of power hummed, a low thrum against my ribs like a caged bird eager to take flight. I focused a sliver of my attention, not on Janice herself, but on the delicate mechanism of her desk lamp. More specifically, on the tiny, almost invisible filament nestled within its bulb. A whisper, barely a breath of sound, formed on my lips, unheard by mortal ears, unheard by Janice's perpetually chattering mouth. Flicker. Her eyes narrowed, ready for another verbal volley. I'm just saying, Elise, some of us actually care about our performance metrics. Hop. The desk lamp on her cubicle, the one she'd painstakingly angled for optimal light distribution, so it shone directly into the eyes of anyone approaching her from the side, burst with a soft, muffled explosion. A small wisp of acrid-smelling smoke curled into the air, and the office lights seemed to dim, though it was just the sudden absence of her personal son. The entire accounting floor went silent, a sudden blessed reprieve from the usual drone. Janice yelped, a genuinely startled sound that was far more satisfying than any witty retort I could conjure. Her perfectly coiffed hair, usually plastered down with an obscene amount of hairspray, seemed to stand on end, slightly rigid with shock. My lamp! What happened? I blinked, feigning surprise. Oh my God, Janice, are you okay? It just blew out. Talk about shoddy manufacturing, huh? My voice was laced with an innocence so saccharine it would give you cavities. She stared at the smouldering remains of the bulb, then at me, her eyes darting between us as if searching for a logical connection. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. For once, she was speechless. The silence was glorious, a symphony of dumbfounded exasperation. Well, I said, pushing my chair back with a squeak, I guess I'll just get back to those reports. We wouldn't want those performance metrics to suffer, would we? I gave her a small, tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. She sputtered something unintelligible, her face colouring a furious shade of red, and then stomped off towards the supply closet, presumably to find a new bulb. The scent of lily and desperation followed her, which I briskly used a sprinkle of magic to get rid of. A small sigh of contentment escaped my lips. This was my kind of magic. No capes, no villains, just a mild, untraceable act of vengeance against the petty tyrannies of the modern workplace. It was a secret, delicious power that made the mundane bearable, transforming minor annoyances into moments of quiet personal triumph. My workday continued, punctuated by the faint hum of my power lying dormant, waiting for its next tiny deployment. Today, the breakroom coffee machine might suddenly dispense lukewarm water instead of coffee. Or maybe someone's stapler would jam in a particularly artistic fashion. The possibilities were endless, and entirely negligible to anyone who wasn't me. The real test of my unique predicament, however, usually came during my commute, especially on the days when the fabric of reality decided to fray a little more than usual. Like this evening. The city around me, usually a symphony of honking taxis, distant sirens, and the ceaseless rumble of the subway, had been plunged into an eerie silence. The evening rush hour, typically a frantic ballet of exhaust fumes and frayed nerves, had ground to a halt. Overhead, the sky, usually a bruised purple at this time, was now a sickly, pulsating green, a truly disgusting shade reminiscent of mouldy pond scum. I stood on the sidewalk, pressed against the concrete barrier, one in a herd of gaping, terrified pedestrians. My shoulder bag felt heavy, pulled down by the weight of my laptop and the lingering existential dread of Tuesday. In front of us, snarled across 6 lanes of traffic, was the reason for the city's sudden, unsettling quiet. It was massive, easily 3 stories tall, and vaguely arthropod-like. A colossal invertebrate, all chitinous plates and razor-sharp limbs that scythed through lampposts and bus shelters like they were made of tissue paper. Its body pulsed with that same disgusting green light, and from its segmented head, a quartet of black, unblinking eyes stared out, reflecting the terror in the eyes of the onlookers. It reeked of ozone, wet earth, and something indescribably alien, a scent that prickled the hairs on my arms. It was a shardling, one of the lesser but still entirely lethal monstrosities that occasionally bled through the veil between worlds. Common urban pests, like giant, sentient cockroaches that could dismantle a car with a casual swipe, A normal person's insurance nightmare. My Tuesday evening annoyance. A woman nearby shrieked, clutching a child to her chest. Sirens, distant and desperate, wailed on the other side of the blocked thoroughfare, signalling the futile approach of emergency services. They'd be here to pick up the pieces, not to actually do anything. This wasn't their pay grade. This was mine. And the pay was simply getting home on time. I usually took the scenic route, avoiding crowded areas on monster days. But tonight, a detour would mean an extra hour, maybe 2, and I had leftover Thai food waiting for me that wasn't going to reheat itself. Besides, tonight's iteration of the Shardling seemed particularly stationary. It was more bottleneck than rampage, an inconvenient obstacle. I sighed, pulling my scarf tighter around my neck, the fabric a small comfort against the unnatural chill that emanated from the creature. My bag slid down my hip, and I adjusted its strap with a practiced movement that concealed a subtle shift in my posture. My eyes, however, weren't scanning the chaos around me. They were fixed on the Shardling's underbelly, specifically on a section where its chitinous plates met, revealing a slightly softer seam. A weak point, if one knew how to look. And I did. The crowd pressed in, a sea of bewildered faces and hushed whispers. No one was looking at me. They were transfixed by the monster, paralyzed by fear and awe. Good. That's how I liked it. Unseen, unnoticed, untangled from the chaotic magic girl drama. A low growl rumbled from the Shardling's colossal frame, vibrations shuddering through the pavement beneath my sneakers. It flexed a massive, serrated limb, sending a parked taxi skittering across the road with a sickening crunch of metal. Oil and coolant began to seep into the asphalt, reflecting the sickly green glow. "All right, you overgrown beetle," I muttered under my breath, my voice lost in the general hum of collective fear. "Let's get this over with." I reached into my pocket, my fingers closing around a smooth, unpolished riverstone I always carried. It wasn't a wand or a staff or any of that theatrical stuff the official magic girls used. It was just a rock. But in my hand, it hummed with a quiet power, a resonance that echoed the dormant energy within me. A focal point. My breath hitched for a moment, not from fear, but from the familiar heady rush of power coiling in my gut. It was a potent, intoxicating feeling, one I tried to keep sequestered, bottled up, lest it overwhelm the mundane, practical part of my brain. I didn't want to get addicted to this. I wanted to use it efficiently and then go home. I pushed forward slightly, moving through the periphery of the panicked crowd, trying to appear as if I was just trying to get a better look, or perhaps escape the crush. My movements were fluid, economical. I angled my body, my right arm subtly shifting, the riverstone now clutched tightly in my fist, almost concealed by the sleeve of my jacket. I took a deep breath, the foul air filling my lungs. My focus narrowed, everything else blurring at the edges. I could feel the hum of the city, the terrified pulses of the onlookers, the monstrous presence of the Shardling. And then there was only the hum of my own power, rising to meet its target. No incantations, no dramatic pronouncements, no changing of clothes. Those were for the showboats, the Instagram-famous magic girls with their sparkles and their synchronized poses. My magic was raw, practical, and brutally efficient. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second, picturing the intricate internal workings of the Shardling, its nervous system, its circulatory processes, the way its green ersatz blood pulsed beneath those impenetrable plates. My magic wasn't about throwing fireballs or summoning shimmering shields. It was about rearrangement, about finding the single critical point of failure and accelerating its natural decay. or perhaps imposing a sudden, violent, and entirely internal one. I exhaled slowly, my eyes snapping open. My gaze was cold, sharp, focused like a laser beam. I extended my hand, palm slightly open, the river stone a small dark anchor in its center. For an instant, a barely perceptible shimmer of distortion hung in the air around my hand, like heat haze off asphalt. Unravel. The command was a thought, not a sound, a silent, potent whisper directed at the creature's core. The colossal shardling paused. Its multifaceted eyes, which had been tracking a fleeing bus, turned slowly, almost inquisitively, towards the spot I was focused on. For a split second, it seemed to sense something, a disturbance in its very being, a discordant note in its alien biology. Then, it began. It wasn't an explosion, not exactly, more like a rapid, violent cellular breakdown, starting from that weak seam, radiating outwards. The green light intensified, then flickered frantically, like a dying neon sign. A low, guttural shriek, impossibly high-pitched for such a massive beast, tore through the air, causing everyone to clap their hands over their ears. The sound was like nails on a blackboard amplified 1,000 times, laced with genuine alien agony. The chitinous plates began to buckle, to crack, not under external force, but from an intense internal pressure, a sudden, catastrophic implosion of its own structure. Its colossal limbs spasmed, tearing apart the already mangled cars around it, but with no directed force, just the chaotic thrashing of a creature in its death throes. A disgusting, sickly green fluid smelling of ammonia and something akin to rotting fish erupted from the fissures in its body, sizzling on the asphalt. The creature's movements grew more erratic, more desperate, its thrashing limbs reducing more vehicles to twisted scrap. But it was already over. Within moments, the entire gargantuan form began to fold in on itself, collapsing like a house of clattering cards, the sound a horrific symphony of crunching chitin and slurping, dissolving flesh. It was unmaking itself. The green light pulsed one last time violently, and then winked out, leaving behind only a shapeless, rapidly shrinking pile of dissolving organic matter and the lingering, noxious stench. The entire process, from my silent command to the creature's complete disintegration, took less than 30 seconds. The crowd remained frozen, their faces pale, eyes wide, breath held collectively. Then, a collective expulsion of air, a ripple of stunned murmurs, followed by terrified whispers. What was that? Someone gasped, their voice barely a whisper. It just disappeared, another stammered. No one had seen me, no one ever did. A monster, a massive, city-stopping threat had simply appeared and then unmade itself. They'd attribute it to a gas leak, a freak lightning strike, some unexplainable cosmic event. News reports would be vague, scientists would offer convoluted theories, and life would resume its frantic pace. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smirk. My Thai food was still warm. I turned, melting back into the suddenly reanimating crowd, trying to find a path through the scattered debris. The low, mournful wail of approaching sirens grew louder. The city was already coming back to life, the collective amnesia of humanity kicking in. They preferred not to dwell on these things, these inconvenient ruptures in their carefully constructed reality. Better to explain it away. Better to forget. It was this casual oblivion that allowed me to exist, a shadow dweller in a world that occasionally spawned horrors, and, less occasionally, produced overtly sparkly saviors. I wasn't the latter. I was just Elise, with a slightly unusual commute. I was weaving my way through the detritus of the monster's collapse when I caught a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. not a terrified pedestrian, not an approaching emergency vehicle. This movement was deliberate, agile, and familiar. My blood ran cold. Perched on the undamaged rooftop of a nearby bookstore, silhouetted against the sickening green-tinged twilight, was a figure. Small, lithe, and unmistakably, tragically sparkly. She wore a ridiculously short skirt that swirled around her knees even in the still air, knee-high boots that shimmered with an iridescent sheen, and a fitted pink and white top that left her midriff bare. A giant, oversized bow, the colour of cotton candy, was pinned precariously in her perfectly coiffed bubblegum pink hair. In her hand, she clutched a chrome-plated wand, topped with a glittering star. A genuine, bona fide, honest-to-God magic girl. Shit. And she was looking straight at the rapidly dissolving pile of monster goo. Or, more accurately, she was looking past it, her gaze sweeping the crowd, searching for the source, searching for me. My breath caught in my throat. I ducked instinctively, blending into the deeper shadows of a building's recessed doorway. My heart hammered against my ribs, a sudden frantic drum. This was the real downside. This was the principal reason I actively despised my gift. The other magic girls. They were everywhere now. Ever since the breach almost 10 years ago, when the veil between dimensions had thinned to tissue paper and all sorts of eldritch nightmares began to seep through, these so-called champions had started popping up. Armed with ridiculous outfits and even more ridiculous, often elemental powers, they battled the encroaching darkness. And more importantly, they battled each other for territory, for recognition, for sponsorship deals with glitter manufacturers. It was like a supernatural Hunger Games, but with way more hair bows and colours. And the recruiters. Oh God, the recruiters. The Academy, the Guild of Radiant Stars, the Twilight Order, they were all vying for new talent, desperate to weaponize anyone with even a fart of magical glitter. They'd send these overly enthusiastic, shiny-eyed magic girls, or sometimes even smarmy, suited types with unnervingly persuasive smiles to track down anomalies like me. I clenched my jaw, pushing myself further into the shadows. My mind raced. She hadn't seen me. Not yet. But she was searching, her head tilted, her pink hair whipping slightly in a breeze that suddenly picked up. Her star-tipped wand glowed faintly, scanning. That was a tracking enchantment. I knew it. A basic one designed to pick up residual magical signatures. And my unraveling routine left plenty of that. I was like a glowing beacon to these lunatics. Oh, come on, I hissed under my breath, my words tasting metallic with frustration. I just wanted my goddamn Thai food. The pink-haired girl, Star Sparkle Starlight, or whatever vapid name she adopted, suddenly stiffened. Her head snapped to the left towards my general direction, her big, doe-like eyes widening. Her wand flared. I knew this song and dance. It was always the same. They'd find the residual energy, try to recruit me, then demand I join their little tea party of justice, or at least explain myself. And I had no explanation. I like to get home on time, so I blow up the occasional monster. Leave me alone. Wasn't exactly a rallying cry for the forces of light. My mind calculated rapidly. Run. That was always the best option. A quick burst of speed, amplification, blend into the remaining pockets of pedestrians, and vanish into the labyrinthine side streets. I could probably make it to the subway station 3 blocks over before she could even descend from the rooftop. But as I prepared to move, a voice, sweet as poisoned honey and amplified by some ethereal means, floated down from the rooftop. Well now, what do we have here? It wasn't the pink-haired girl. This voice was deeper, more melodious, laced with an almost mocking amusement. And it came from just behind the first magic girl. I risked a quick, discreet glance. Another figure had appeared on the rooftop. This one was entirely different. Her aesthetic eschewed the saccharine in favor of something darker, more dangerous. She wore a tight, obsidian black leather catsuit, reflecting the dying city lights. Her hair, the color of midnight, spilled down her back, and two small, wicked-looking horns, like polished onyx, protruded from her temples. Her eyes glowed with a faint, predatory violet light. In one hand, she held a short, wicked-looking sickle that pulsed with dark energy. A dark sorceress, or whatever they called themselves these days, the rivals, the anti-heroes. Just as annoying, but with more angst and less glitter. The pink-haired girl, Star Sparkle whoever, visibly stiffened. "Shadow Weaver," she spat, her voice losing its previous syrupy sweetness, replaced by a brittle edge. "What are you doing here?" Shadow Weaver chuckled, a low, throaty sound that somehow carried over the urban din. "Oh, just enjoying the evening stroll, Starlight, and admiring your efficiency. You cleared that nasty little bug out quite quickly. Impressive." Her gaze, however, was not on Starlight. It was sweeping the ground below, precisely where my own residual magical signature was strongest. She was a tracker too, and probably had a damn sight better than the amateur with the star wand. Great! Double trouble. This was worse. Two magic girls from opposing factions, both zeroing in on the energy signature of my monster disposal. This wasn't going to be a simple escape. This was going to be a recruitment push, or worse, a fight over me, which meant I'd be forced to reveal my abilities and then all hell would break loose. I saw Starlight follow Shadow Weaver's gaze, her eyes snapping down to the ground. Her expression shifted from annoyance at Shadow Weaver to confusion, then dawning realization. The subtle distortion in the air, the faint, shimmering afterglow of intense magic, was still somewhat visible to those with the sight for it. She pinpointed my exact location with unnerving precision. Our eyes met. Her candy-pink lips parted slightly in surprise. My heart sank into my stomach. "There you are," Shadow Weaver purred, her voice a silk and thread cutting through the rising clamor of the city. Her violet eyes, now fully illuminated, glowed like embers in the gathering gloom. "A rogue spark, isn't that fascinating?" Starlight, meanwhile, was already mobilizing. Her little star wand pulsed with a soft pink light. "Hey, you, on the ground! Identify yourself! Are you affiliated with an academy? What was that power you just used?" Her voice was shrill, demanding, and utterly infuriating. My escape routes were rapidly diminishing. Two trained magic users, one on the side of light and one on the side of dark, both staring directly at me, their attention undivided. The initial panic of the crowd was giving way to morbid curiosity as they noticed the two figures on the rooftop, one pink and glittery, one dark and menacing, both clearly not normal office workers. Phones were already coming out, their screens lighting up like tiny constellations. I was about to become a viral meme. I let out an exasperated sigh that could have deflated a hot air balloon. This was exactly what I meant. This was the bullshit I wanted to avoid. The grandstanding, the posturing, the ridiculous costumes. My hand instinctively moved to the Riverstone in my pocket, warming it, drawing on that deep, quiet hum of power. I might hate this, but if they thought I was going to be some damsel in distress or a meek recruit, they had another thing coming. "All right, ladies," I mumbled, pushing out of the doorway, stepping back into the weak, flickering glow of a damaged neon sign. I adjusted my shoulder bag, ensuring it was tight against my side, ready for movement. My gaze flickered between Starlight and Shadow Weaver, a cynical smirk tugging at the corner of my lips. Looks like my evening just got a lot more inconvenient. The crowd started to murmur, pointing at me now. Look, there's another one, someone exclaimed. Starlight pointed her wand at me, its pink glow intensifying. Come with me, peacefully. The Guild of Radiant Stars wants to speak with you about that unauthorized energy signature. Her voice was surprisingly firm, despite the ridiculous outfit. Shadow Weaver's sickle hummed with a low, malevolent thrum. Or, she countered, her voice dropping to a seductive whisper, you could join someone who appreciates true power. The Twilight Order rarely takes no for an answer, little spark. My eye twitched. Unauthorized energy signature? I scoffed. You mean the one that just saved your precious city from being flattened? Get a grip, Pinky. And you, I glanced at Shadow Weaver, the only order I'm interested in is my takeout order, and it's getting cold. Starlight's face flushed crimson. Don't you dare call me Pinky. I'm Starbeam Aurora, and you will show respect to a recognized hero. Starbeam Aurora? I thought she was named Starlight. Oh well, it didn't matter. Shadow Weaver merely tilted her head, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her lips. Feisty. I like that. What's your name, little spark? I rolled my eyes. Elise Vance, and I'm not a little spark. I'm an accountant, and I am not joining either of your ridiculously named clubs. I glanced down at my sensible shoes, then back at their theatrical attire. Seriously, you two look like you just walked out of a particularly badly animated cartoon. That seemed to unite them, if only in their offense. Starbeam Aurora gasped, her wand practically blazing with indignation. Shadow Weaver's smile tightened, turning into something sharper, more predatory. You have no idea who you're talking to, Starbeam Aurora shrieked, launching herself off the rooftop. She descended in a graceful, glowing arc of pink energy, landing with a light thud about 20 feet in front of me, her wand pointed directly at my chest. The pink energy coiled around her, making her a beacon in the twilight. Shadow Weaver, not to be outdone, dropped from the rooftop in a dark, silent descent, landing like a cat, her silhouette merging with the lengthening shadows behind Starbeam. Her sickle pulsed, casting an eerie violet gleam across the pavement. Two glowing pairs of eyes, one starry pink, one dangerous violet, stared me down. The crowd, meanwhile, was collectively losing its mind. Shouts and camera flashes erupted, turning the scene into a surreal, impromptu spectacle. Capture her! Starbeam Aurora commanded, her voice ringing out, clearly meant for my compliance. No, Shadow Weaver countered, her voice a low growl. Negotiate or incapacitate. She has potential, Aurora. Don't ruin it. My patience, already thinner than my office tape machine, snapped. Potential? Incapacitate? Are you two out of your goddamn minds? I just want to go home. I clenched the river stone in my pocket tighter, the faint hum of power now a steady thrum against my palm. My magic wasn't flashy, but it was effective. And right now, effective meant getting two highly irritating magic girls out of my way. I looked at Starbeam Aurora's gleaming boots, then at Shadow Weaver's obsidian claws wrapped around her sickle's hilt. The world might call them heroes and villains, but I just saw two more obstacles between me and my cold noodles. A flicker of an idea, a very minor inconvenience, began to form in my mind. One that might just buy me enough time to finally disappear into the night. It wouldn't just be a jammed stapler this time, but it wouldn't be a full-blown magic girl brawl either. Just enough to throw them off balance. My eyes narrowed, a cold, calculated glint in their depths. Fine. You want to see potential. You want to see what unauthorized energy can do. I let the riverstone hum loudly in my hand, a silent challenge in the increasing din. Be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for, I repeated, my voice a low growl against the rising clamour of the gawking crowd. My knuckles, still clenched around the river stone in my pocket, whitened. My cynicism was a shield, but even shields could crack under enough pressure. These people, these heroes and villains, were not just annoying. They were a legitimate threat to my carefully constructed mediocrity, and they were loud. Starbeam, Aurora, Starlight, or Pinky let out a huffy little sound, her chest puffing out theatrically. There's no need for threats, civilian. Just cooperate, and no one gets hurt. The star on her wand pulsed with an aggressive, saccharine glow. Shadow Weaver, ever the pragmatist, narrowed her glowing violet eyes. Cooperation is always preferred, little spark. But compliance, that can be arranged. Her sickle dipped slightly, its wicked point glinting in the sickly green-tinged city lights. My gaze flickered between them. One, a cotton candy nightmare of righteousness. The other, an edgy, hot topic model with a penchant for menacing rhetoric. Both, fundamentally, self-absorbed drama queens who thought their chosen cosplay granted them universal authority. I hated them both equally. All right, Elise, focus. What would be the most irritating, the most disruptive without actually causing bodily harm that would escalate this into a full-blown, property-destroying battle they'd probably blame on me anyway? My eyes landed on Starbeam Aurora. Her ridiculously voluminous pink hair, held in place by that monstrous bow, was just begging for it. And her costume, all those shimmering, almost transparent fabrics. My lip curled in a disgusted smirk. Then, to Shadow Weaver. Her sleek, custom-fitted leather, the very epitome of cool. Her dark flowing hair, the little horns, all very carefully curated. A slow, insidious hum permeated my being, the power coiling, not for destruction, but for prankery. I didn't need to unravel their internal organs. I just needed to dismantle their carefully maintained facades. First, Pinky. Her uniform was clearly designed for maximal aesthetic impact, not minimal friction. Every shimmer, every sparkle, every seam, a perfect target for intensification. I focused on the very air molecules around her, the static electricity that made her hair float so perfectly, the microscopic particles responsible for her glitter. Amplify, detach, disperse. A silent, venomous command, barely a thought. A beat of silence. Then, with a sound like a million tiny bells tinkling, Starbeam Aurora's entire being exploded in a shimmering cloud of unholy, eye-watering glitter. It wasn't just a sheen, it was an eruption. Her hair, previously pink, now looked like it had been dipped in a vat of industrial-strength superglue, and then rolled through a craft store. Her skirt, already short, suddenly found itself clinging, bunching, and riding up in the most unflattering ways imaginable, as if every fibre was trying to escape her body. Simultaneously, the perfectly coiffed bubblegum pink cascade of her hair began to stand on end, crackling with static until it bristled like a shocked poodle's. She shrieked, a sound more of utter mortification than pain. My glitter! What have you done? She began frantically batting at herself, sending even more shimmering particles swirling through the air, contaminating the immediate vicinity in a nebula of iridescent dust. She dropped her wand in surprise, covering her mouth with both hands, leaving streaks of pink glitter on her lips. Shadow Weaver, caught slightly off guard by the sheer absurdity, paused for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something akin to genuine bewilderment crossing her usually impassive face. That was all I needed. My focus shifted, razor-sharp, to Shadow Weaver. Black leather, sleek and unyielding. The material itself wasn't the target. Her weapon, though, had a delicate balance. And those horns? definitely not organic. Loosen, pinch, itch. Another whispered thought, direct and precise. Shadow Weaver's eyes suddenly widened. Her hand flew to her head, scrabbling at the base of her horns. They wobbled, and then, with a soft, almost comical clink, both horns snapped clean off their moorings, tumbling to the pavement with surprisingly dull thuds. Realization dawned on her face, quickly followed by a dark, dangerous flush. These weren't parts of her body. They were clearly a meticulously crafted part of her costume, held on by some adhesive. Simultaneously, her sleek, custom-fitted leather catsuit, which had previously hugged every curve with improbable perfection, suddenly felt wrong. 1,000 tiny phantom points of irritation bloomed all over her skin from within the suit's lining. It wasn't pain, but a pervasive, maddening itch that no amount of scratching could alleviate. It was like wearing a full-body sweater spun from fiberglass. Her otherwise perfect dark hair, previously flowing like a river of midnight, suddenly felt heavy, greasy, and tangled, as if she'd just doused it in week-old chip fat. She let out a frustrated growl, far more guttural than Pinky's shriek. "You witch!" she spat, her violet eyes burning with a fury hot enough to melt steel. She dropped her sickle, her free hands clawing desperately at her neck, then up into her suddenly clumpy hair. Her perfectly applied dark lipstick smudged across her cheek as she tried to scratch the unreachable itch under her jaw. The crowd, which had started to back away in terror, now hesitated, a few bewildered snickers breaking through the lingering tension. The sight of the two formidable magic girls, suddenly reduced to such petty, humiliating disarray, was apparently too much for their fragile sensibilities to process without a touch of dark humor. "I wouldn't advise scratching that," I said, a genuine, mirthless smile finally gracing my lips. "It only makes it worse." I didn't wait for their indignant replies. This was my window. I channeled a surge of kinetic energy into my legs, not enough to turn me into a blur, but enough for an unnatural burst of speed that would still appear plausible in the general chaos. I dashed forward, cutting hard right, weaving through the slack-jawed onlookers. Most were still focused on the glittering, thrashing mess that was Starbeam Aurora, or the furious, itching form of Shadow Weaver. My shoulder bag thumped against my hip as I ran, my sensible sneakers pounding the concrete. I didn't look back. The sounds of their renewed outrage, combined with the surprised gasps of the crowd, slowly faded behind me. I took the shortest, most convoluted route I knew, doubling back through a dark alleyway that smelled of stale beer and desperation, vaulting over overflowing dumpsters with an almost supernatural grace. Normal people didn't quite move like that, but in the urban jungle, a little extra agility could always be explained away by adrenaline. Or a particularly good day at the gym. My destination was the subway station, 3 blocks south. Even if they shook off the effects of my minor inconveniences quickly, they'd have to contend with the growing crowd, the arriving police and emergency services, and the sheer embarrassment of their current states. That would buy me enough time. I ran, the cool night air stinging my cheeks, a faint trace of ozone still clinging to the city air like a forgotten promise. The mundane world was a fragile thing, easily shattered by these incursions, and equally capable of patching itself right back up, ignoring the cracks in the veneer. A few more blocks, a quick swipe of my Metro card, and I'd be underground, lost in the anonymous churn of humanity, back to being Elise Vance, the accountant who just wanted her damn leftover tie. As I descended the grimy stairs into the subway, the distant wail of sirens finally receding, a strange cocktail of residual adrenaline and weary satisfaction washed over me. I'd done it, again, annoyance averted, commute salvaged, Thai food still within reach. The smell of that unique staleness and metallic dust filled my nostrils, a familiar comfort compared to chemical glitter and the faint stench of alien decay. The subway car, when it finally rumbled into the station, was relatively empty, a blessing at this time of night. I found a seat by the window, slumping down, and let out a long, shuddering breath. I allowed myself a small, fleeting moment of self-congratulation. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't heroic, but it was effective. And unlike those two drama queens, I didn't need their applause, their recognition, or their ridiculous academy recruitment brochures. They could keep their sparkly pink battle skirts and their edgy black leather. I had my sensible jeans, my comfortable sneakers, and my blessed anonymity. My fingers, still clutching the smooth river stone in my pocket, slowly relaxed. It vibrated faintly, a tiny whisper of power, reassuring and familiar. It was a handy tool, a necessary evil, but one I cursed every time it drew the attention of those obsessed with the magic girl life. A notification buzzed on my phone, startling me slightly. My eyes flickered down. It was a cryptic, untraceable message, appearing in a secure folder I maintained. Anomaly detected. Subject is highly resistant. Further engagement advised. Recommend Sector 7 for direct recruitment protocol. Initiate covert surveillance. The guild will not be denied. I scoffed, a bitter, humorless sound that echoed faintly in the empty subway car. Of course they won't, I muttered, sliding the phone back into my pocket. Stupid guild. The train lurched, then began to move, gathering speed, carrying me further away from the absurdity above ground. But the message hung in the air of my mind, a chilling reminder. They were persistent. They always were. Tonight's minor inconveniences were just a delay, a temporary respite, a game of whack-a-mole with cosmic consequences. The magic girl life. I never wanted it, and even with its perks, it was still a pain in my perfectly normal ass. I just wanted my apartment, my cat, and a night free of existential threats and overly zealous recruiters. Was that too much to ask? Probably. The train rattled on, pulling me deeper into the anonymity of the underground, but I knew, with a certainty that settled like a lead weight in my gut, that they would be back. They always were. And next time, they wouldn't send the amateurs. Next time, it would be someone far less susceptible to itchy catsuits and glitter-induced meltdowns. And I hated them in advance for it.